Welcome to the DLAI Fintech Conclave 2024 podcast series brought to you by the Digital Lenders Association of India and India Fintech Diaries. In a recent study by EY on the adoption of generative AI by Indian financial services, EY found that 78% of surveyed C-suite executives indicated that they had either adopted generative AI use cases or were in the process of doing so in the next 12 months. Given the massive interest in generative AI, we thought that we would demystify what this means for fintech and what implications it could have for compliance and growth. To discuss the intersection of fintech and AI, we are joined by two special guests on the show. Our first guest, Anuj Kacker, is the co-founder of Freo, India's first full-stack consumer neobank. He is a serial entrepreneur, having previously worked in the skill assessment and job discovery space. Prior to his transition to entrepreneurship, Anuj spent his early years in advertising, where he worked with top agencies. After a break for education, Anuj spent half a decade in the telecom industry, where he rose to become the head of customer acquisitions for Airtel's Karnataka Circle. Anuj is an alumnus of the prestigious Indian School of Business and holds a degree in mathematics from St. Xavier's, Mumbai. Our second guest, Neeraj Gupta, is the managing director of Branch International. An IIM Lucknow alumnus, Neeraj has held a variety of roles across firms such as Goldman Sachs, Accenture, Traction, Unimoney and FICO. I'm your host, Elroy Serram, and this is India Fintech Diaries. Welcome to India Fintech Diaries, the show for all things Indian Fintech. Today we continue our collaboration with the Digital Lenders Association of India on the occasion of the DLAI Fintech Conclave 2024. Last week, OpenAI announced its new AI offering Sora, its revolutionary new tool that converts text to video. AI has certainly come a long way from being able to beat humans at chess to now generating text, video, and images creatively. As AI use cases expand, it's also finding application in financial services. So today we thought we would discuss its potential and some of the challenges for it in fintech and lending. And to discuss this topic with us, we have Anuj Kacker, co-founder at Freo, and Neeraj Gupta, managing director at Branch International. Welcome to India Fintech Diaries, Anuj and Neeraj.
Hey, thanks, Elroy, for having us here.
Thanks, Elroy. Nice to be here.
Anuj, Neeraj, to begin with, maybe you could give us a quick introduction of yourselves.
My name is Anuj. I'm the co-founder of a company called Freo. Freo is a digital banking platform for the large middle-income population of India. Everybody who has a bank account. India is not a unbanked society; it's an underbanked society. So if you think about how your relationship with money progresses, you start by having a payment account, or bank account, then a payment account, or payment instrument. Then you get credit in your life. Then you get insurance. Then you invest the surplus money. So you go through this entire cycle, and we at Freo believe that we have a role to play in that journey of your financial needs, and that for a very specific middle-income family or a middle-income household, as we all have grown up as that. The top 1% people obviously get they have 5 bank accounts, they're relationship managers, at their beck and call, but the large mass don't have that facility. And we thought that having something on the app and digitally being able to access financial products is the way to go. And hence, Freo was born. We are in about 1,200 cities in India, and we have products across pay, save, borrow, insure, and we will soon be getting to the wealth side. And that's what we've been doing. It's a quick intro from my side. Thanks.
Hey, I'll also just introduce myself. So I head the India business for a global fintech, which is called Branch International. Branch has been working in emerging markets for 9 years now. The India business, which is about 5 years old, is an NBFC, so we are an RBI regulated entity. And at the moment, we are a digital lender focused on the retail segment. So far in the 5 years of existence, we've given more than 3,000 crore worth of loans. We have about close to 1 million active customers on our platform, and we're operational pan-India.
When we talk about AI, there are largely two use case families that come into focus, Anuj and Neeraj. They are largely predictive, where AI is used to predict outcomes based on historical patterns, and generative, where AI is used to generate new outcomes based on its past learning. Now, a recent study by EY India found that a staggering 78% of respondents from Indian financial services sector had either already implemented use cases or were in the process of doing so in the next 12 months. Now, from your experience, how are you seeing adoption in the fintech space in India? And maybe Anuj, you could go first.
You're right that predictive AI has already been around for a few years. I think all of us, and I'm sure Neeraj will agree as well. We've been using AI tools to be able to build our underwriting models, use it for fraud, use it for transaction analysis. So we've been doing some sort of AI modeling, if you will. Maybe in
Right.
today's day and age, it looks very, very primitive what we used to do in the past, but we
Correct.
have been doing it for quite many years. Now, this new wave of AI that's come across, I want to clarify, right? There are two parts of this, even this AI, right? So one is the regular AI, which is where machine learns and does work, and then there's this entire generative AI, which is where you generate not exact values, you generate a large piece of work. That's why, if you notice, a lot of the work that is happening today is around the creative side of things, whether it's video through Sora, or it is through Dolly, or through images, a lot of the text stuff. So it's able to take a lot of the work out there and create a full, a general view of what you want as an output. For specific outputs like a yes or a no or a good or a bad, if you notice, a
Yeah.
lot of the stuff AI has not been able to do, and that's why the things like math problems or STEM problems, it is still figuring out what's the best way to do it. And I mean, I'm sure it'll get there, but if you look at it's not been able to crack that problem. Now, in lending and financial institutions, unlike the creative industry, you need to be very specific, right? So I
Yeah.
give a bunch of input. I say, go, yes, lend, no, don't lend. It's very straightforward, right? I don't think you can be in a position to say that, I think it might be okay. I don't think a lot of
Right.
the models and the financial models will be built on that. Having said that, there's a ton of mundane work that happens along the process of evaluation, fraud, paperwork, etc., which the AI and the generative AI bit will be able to parse and be able to tell you, hey, this looks good, but it will not be 100% yes or no. I think it will be the 80% yes or 80% no. And then there'll be some, you have to put in your own variables, which is what all of us do, to say
Right.
that, okay, here are my parameters, and then here are the parameters that the AGI has given us. And now let me just go and see whether I want to approve this customer or not. So I think from a reduction of so much of manual work across the entire process and the value chain, I think AI is already doing a lot of work, and like you rightly pointed out, everybody's trying to do something or the other. And it has definitely has the sharp end of the stick, which is or the first use case definitely seems to be a lot on the fraud side of things. Again, a lot of companies are already doing it, but we all are seeing a lot of work and a lot of help on the fraud side, because there is really a lot about pattern matching of past fraud trends. Again, but it will never be an exact science as of right now. It will always tell you green, yellow, red, and then you need to go and figure out what you need to do. So I think, yeah, you're right. Everybody seems to be at least experimenting and tinkering with it, and is definitely a focus over the next 12 to 18 months in their business plan.
Neera, just doubling down on some of the points that Anuj raised, right? Wanted to also get your sense and perspective on how AI is actually being used in lending today, and specifically around underwriting and customer onboarding. It'd be great to give get your perspectives as well.
Yeah, Anuj, I think yeah, the adoption of AI has really obviously skyrocketed. Branch has, like I said earlier, has been in this space for 9 years in different markets outside India as well. And from the get-go, the bias has been to use AI in underwriting. And I think if we look at the Indian landscape, I think Anuj would agree that if we look at the India fintech industry 5 years from now, the use of AI in underwriting was slightly more superficial compared to what we see today. I think there are a lot of decisions on the underwriting side. It may not be a final yes or no, but pretty much every fintech out there has their own secret sauce, and more often than not, especially true for the at scale fintechs, their secret sauce is based on a AI generated score. So I think the efficiencies that AI based underwriting brings in, that just creates so much efficiency that I think any at scale player is right now finding it very difficult to resist to not use AI. And not only that, I think, again, like Anuj said, every lender pretty much keeps iterating on their underwriting models and keeps improving them. And I think, yeah, there's still a long way to go. The one thing to appreciate about not just the underwriting use case, rather any use case, that any outcome, any sort of a decision, if I may say, based on AI will always be probabilistic in nature. It will not be
Right.
deterministic in nature, right? So essentially, what the AI will try to do is, think of, even if you give them one sample customer, it will try to rate that. It will try to rate it as if it's rating a population, right? And it will
Correct.
give a probability score in some sense or the other, right? So I think, where the I mean, it's to be able to extract the right kind of value from AI is dependent on how you implement it, how you productize it. It has always got to be in conjunction with, let's say, the right policies or the right processes, so that there is that layer which takes it from, a probabilistic function to a more deterministic function when it comes to taking binary decisions, let's say, on underwriting. So that's how we look at it. Even at Branch, we keep iterating on the AI side as far as underwriting is concerned, and we have a bias for it. Actually, we'd rather have as few heuristics in our underwriting as possible, and
Right.
as much AI based modeling. The other thing I think you spoke about is the onboarding piece. So yeah,
Yes.
I think that, there the value add is, I guess, not so obvious, but it does help. I would say, if it does not create value, at least it reduces negative value. So again, along the lines of what Anuj said, when we're onboarding customers, primarily we are interested in KYC. Primarily we're interested in making sure, there's no intent fraud happening. So those are some of the use cases where AI has been, has really helped, especially for digital lenders, because all of us are trying to run relatively lean operations, and this kind of tech really has proven to be the the real differentiator, if I may say.
Anu, just to pivot a little towards neobanking, if you look at today's customer, right, all of them really want to get really personalized experiences from their bank.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
They also want to really understand their finances better. How do you think AI will actually help drive some of this?
yeah. You know, there was this wave of a lot of products and apps that came out maybe about 10 years ago or 10, 15 years ago, which were in that personal finance management space, which
That's
would
right.
typically, use your SMS data or whatever data you inputted and helped you manage your finance better, budget better. They would read your if you give access to some of your credit card information, maybe they would look at there, and it would be called a spend analyzer, or and whatever else you would like, right? And banks typically had that feature themselves because they used to bank with the customer, used to bank with them, and then the bank account would have all the details, and they would just categorize them into this is food, this is that, etc., etc. So this has been going on for quite some time, but those companies, unfortunately, I don't know if any of us use those products now, by the way, because there's a use case there, and you would use that data to maybe cross sell, upsell more lucrative products. But that use case per se was like, once I figure out my broad pattern of spend is this, I would typically uninstall the app, or become completely inactive. So, you know, just having a product of being able to tell me what my spending patterns is, what my expense patterns is, how do I need to save based on what my current data is good, but it's probably just very limiting in its use case. But today with AI, I think what's happening is, at least the way we are thinking about it, is that you should be able to get the customers not just one bank account, but maybe if he has three bank accounts. And not today, account aggregator is able to do that.
Right.
You should be able to get the customer's credit card statement, which you could give access to through your Gmail or whatever else, if you give access to your credit card statements, or if you're doing it through the same platform. And now with UPI, and if you have your own UPI piece on your own on your app, then you will know the transactions that are flowing back and forth. So if you put all of this together and you put that in a digital banking app, suddenly you will actually get a very holistic view of the customer's expenses and savings. So what we do at Freo, for example, is we look at your bank accounts. We also have a bank account product, right? So a savings account product with Equitas Small Finance Bank as a partner. So we are able
Right.
to look at all their entire bank statements. We are able to look at their statement data that they have, the debit, credit. We have UPI on our app, so we're able to look at their UPI transactions. Of course, we do lending. We've been doing it for the last 7 odd years. Our lending vertical previously was called Money Tap. Now, obviously, we're called Freo. So we've been doing it for quite some time as a line of credit product, from short ticket to high ticket. So that information flows through us. Also, able to figure out what how much leverage you have. We have information on your credit bureau, so you're able to look at that information and see, again, with the consent of the customer, you're able to see whether the guy is over leveraged or under leveraged. And now going forward, because you are neo banking platform or a digital banking platform, we'll get into the wealth side. So again, through consent, I'm also able to track what your investments are. Again, account aggregator helps there, and you
Yeah.
put all of this together in one view and you give to the customer. Now there's so much of data that you will yourself will get lost, forget what the customer will do. So there, I think putting all of this together in a format which the AI can read and spit out trends and analytics is super helpful to us, honestly speaking. And that is something that has suddenly become a genuine use case. But I want to be very sure it's a great use case for consumers, it's a great use case for us to give, but it's not a monetizable use case. I'm not sure people will pay money to just to get that. But it's a great hook. It's a great way to get people to come in, stay around, stick around, see what you're doing, how you can do better. And based on, let's say the guy says that, he's already put in a goal of saving money for a marriage, say 1 year later. You can look at the expense pattern and say, man, you need about, say, 5 lakh rupees. You don't want to be able to get there. Maybe I can give you credit, or let me help you save money in this fashion versus that fashion. Because now you have a payment, you have savings, you have borrowing, you have also the wealth side of things, and the neo banking platform, which in fact was very restricted to us when we were only doing only lending. And I think the having all these value proposition has sort of unlocked a few things for us. And AI is we are in the process of launching this entire thing that I just told you. So it's a great tool for us to have, and AI definitely helps there.
Neeraj, I think the other area that we're really looking at where AI can actually be helpful is this entire space around support and servicing, right? So, like we have all used chatbots for support in the past, but I personally have found it a lot restrictive because unless if I had a query that didn't fit in that neat FAQ bucket that chatbot understood, I couldn't get my query answered, right? But generative AI certainly has the potential to change this entire capability and how we interact with chatbots. So I wanted to get a sense from you on how some of the use cases in customer servicing, etc., might evolve as far as AI is concerned, and also maybe as a corollary to that, how do you see this actually impacting collections?
Yeah, great question, Elroy. So I think outside of risk management slash underwriting, customer support is probably the most obvious use case of generative AI specifically. And again, I think in this space, we have been branch has been using responses at least in a semi-automated manner. So a lot of times when customers, you know, come to our platform and ask for some support or ask for some queries to be clarified, what ends up happening at our end, and we've been doing this for several years, which is our AI will suggest a response to our customer service agent, and but then they'll take a manual look and then they'll respond to the customer.
Okay.
We've not spent as much energy on productizing it and just taking it to a level where the complete interaction is automated with a robot. But yeah, I guess that's the next step. And I think with generative AI, this is a very very obvious use case. And again, it does increase efficiencies. It does make customer service available to customers, you know across like 24/7. It helps. We can now parse content. One of the fintechs, somebody who's a big part of DLAI, etc., they released a tech which actually parses regulations and can advise fintechs on what kind of view to take on certain complicated regulatory matters. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I think right now we're at a stage where the customer service portion to a very large degree is automatable. But just repeating what I said earlier, because this is
Right.
not very deterministic, it will always need some kind of a um, call it a concurrent audit layer, so that
Yeah.
we make sure we don't have any kind of problems, so that we're not losing track of the sides of our business which we've tried to automate. And I think collections, again, like this is another area that branch as an organization has been able to harness AI pretty well. So we create scorecards which are powered by AI, and we rate customers across a 2 by 2 matrix around intent and ability, and try to assign them some scores. And ultimately, what we're trying to come up with, based on those scores and based on where each individual customer's lands on that 2 by 2 matrix, is strategies for collecting a bit more, collecting that amount faster, and collecting it at a cheaper cost, right? And all that, the backbone of that is a scorecard which is powered by AI. And I'm sure, like, that's just one aspect that even before generative AI came on board, like these use cases were possible. But now I guess you can come up with customized messages, customized engagement campaigns, when you're trying to collect money back from customers. So yeah, the possibilities are just too many. We have too many ideas, and I guess too little bandwidth to implement.
Anuj, would you like to add also to this?
Yeah, sure. I love the line that Neeraj said that we have too many ideas and not as much bandwidth to execute them. Many years ago, we integrated one of the chatbots that you mentioned, and it was very straightforward, right? Customer could send us a query, and you had to just respond, or it was automated at first, but then after a few rounds of automation, it would typically lead to somebody in the customer support team who would respond. And it turned out that every time the customer would send us a query, they would very quickly exhaust their automated reply quota, because they were asking questions like, when will I get approved? When will I get approved? Status of my application, status of my application. Now, in lending, you typically sometimes takes less than a day, but if the customer is not able to do their entire KYC on time, and there's a physical part required, that in those days we were doing a portion of it, it would take about 3 or 4 days. And then every hour the customer would just say status, 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 status. And the other thing that we found out, that people ended up using this as regular chat. I mean, they were sending good morning messages also on that, which you typically see on your WhatsApp groups. And we were like, completely, this is not making any sense, and we actually had to stop it, and said that this automation is not for us. So unless and until you're able to answer and take the query to its logical conclusion, given that the customer will have question about the application process, the customer will have the problem of repayment, or based on that, I have two other questions, or what if this does not happen, what if that does not happen. And if you're not able to take that to the right, to the logical end, we found that chatbots were probably more of, you had to put people behind chatbots, so it was not helping us, automate or make the experience a little bit better. And I think, and I'm hopeful, and we are also trying the same thing, is with AI today, we are able to do that. The AI can run on our own data and be able to answer the fourth, fifth level of question, and maybe at the sixth level, the person can come in to address very specific queries. But without that, it did not make sense, and I think that's something that all of us are at least experimenting with. I just thought that this was an interesting piece of information I thought I'd share with you.
Definitely interesting, Anuj. And actually, this is a great time to segue into the other part of our conversation today, which is actually some of the challenges in adopting some of these new technologies. And I think one of the primary challenges as far as generative AI is concerned is largely going to be hallucinations, where the AI actually ends up making up stuff, if you could call it, right, in its responses that simply doesn't exist. Examples could be maybe slightly incorrect responses to chatbot questions, or gap filling of parameters when actually a null parameter should have gone in models and so on. So, Anuj, how do you see some of these challenges playing out as well
Yeah,
as you go about adopting?
yeah. Yeah, I think you rightly pointed out that in statistics you have these false positives and false negatives, right?
Correct.
And
Correct.
this is just these hallucinations and terms like these are just the generative AI version of plain old stats in some
Correct.
ways. But in lending, Android, this is a reality that all of us have been facing for quite some time, and that's why, at least in the original part of this conversation, I was telling you that it's unfortunately it's not used for very specific exact use
Correct.
cases, and even like in Neeraj said, it's not deterministic from that perspective. So unless and until AI develops to an extent where you can 100% rely on it, those challenges will always be there, and the final decision and the final responsibility will lie with your own morals. It's not to say that
Right.
you need humans. Like today, we don't have any humans unless and until there's a little bit of a fraud that we need to do. So we also don't have human intervention from that perspective, but and it's pretty automated. But then the AI bit has to couple with your models to be able to say that okay, now I can underwrite yes no, now I can collect yes no, now I can do fraud yes no. And a lot of the hallucinations, like you mentioned, happen in the fraud sector as well, or the fraud bucket,
Right.
which is that I find that Elroy should be given a loan while the model would say no for whatever reason, a different reason, and that's a loss to me because I lost a great customer, who should have been given 500,000 rupees and he would have paid me back and made money. And I'd gone ahead and approved Anuj, who is should have not been approved. And those are things that, and the loss rates and the cost of that bad decision is pretty high in our industry. If you compare
Right.
that to an industry of say a cab or a food ordering, that cost is not so high. I mean, you probably, or e-commerce for that matter, right? You will go and delivers a place where the guy will not pay you COD, or he'll refuse the order. ठीक है, I know, you'll get like maybe the 200 rupee loss or 500 rupee loss or 1,000 rupee
Correct.
loss. It's not going to be that much of a difference. Your model will become better and so on and so forth. The fraud for us in the world of finance where money is involved is like, it's just the magnitude is very, very high, and the cost of a wrong decision hurts us far more than any other industry. Until such time that it becomes very specific and deterministic in that nature, it will always be challenging to completely 100% depend on it. And I'll also take a regulatory view before maybe Neeraj can come in as well. You're hearing a lot of the RBI saying that they're talking about they're questioning, how people are getting underwritten because they are worried about a lot of the
Right.
credit happening at the smaller end of the ticket size, and they've increased the risk weight. They're talking about how are you ensuring that you're not discriminating against a certain customer, not discriminating in the sense that in a wrong way, but probably you're being too loose in your underwriting, and you're
Right.
distributing credit and creating a bubble in that sense. Is your model tight or not? So you always need to have auditable trails from that perspective, and you cannot say the machine did it, I don't know. So I think
Correct.
that's also going to be a big challenge of how the regulators also adopt the use of AI in our systems, which probably will happen over the next few years. So I think these are some of the challenges that at least we are seeing today.
Where we are in AI adoption, they're wielding a very raw tool, and I think we're not able to. We When I say we, I mean as an industry, are not able to, especially being in a regulated space, are not able to fully harness the efficiencies that it can bring in. But I think it will happen over time. I think right now we don't have any well-defined regulatory framework. I think there have been some committees that RBI has put together that has talked about potentially glass box AI versus black box AI, explainable AI, etc. But I don't think there is well-defined regulations or well-defined frameworks at the moment, or don't think anything like that will be happening in the next 6 months also to be able to regulate the use of AI. But yeah, I think slowly and slowly, I think we'll capture more efficiencies, and we'll move to a more compliant.
Anuj, I'm glad you brought up fraud because, as far as AI is concerned, there are some interesting developments there as well, right? There was recently this case where an accountant in charge of payments in a firm in Hong Kong was tricked into remitting $25 million from the company account as an authorized payment.
Yeah.
And the way the scammers tricked him was actually pretty interesting. They tricked him into joining a video conference call, where he was joined by his boss and his co-workers, which were actually scammers using AI to do impersonation. And his boss basically authorized the payment on the call, and this chap went ahead and did it. Now, when you kind of juxtapose this kind of technology sophistication with how scammers can actually use this to trick liveliness tests, for example, in video KYC, it opens up an entire Pandora's box of where fraud can go. So, where do you think this would go as far as KYC is concerned? And do you think at some point, if the regulator is not able to get a firm control on it, we may even end up going back to physical KYC?
Yeah, pretty innovative fraud, by the way, I must say. But other than that, I'm not sure that the regulator will go back to physical KYC because there's enough fraud that happens in physical KYC itself. And the reason
That's
why
right.
digital KYC was introduced was to ensure that there's a digital signature and there's an Aadhaar and there's a two-factor and so many other things, right? So if you do a digital KYC, you have to have your Aadhaar number, you have to have your same mobile number which is entered in the Aadhaar, and then there's an OTP. So there's a couple, two, three levels or layers of that, and so on and so forth. I think that we may not go back to the physical side of things, but in fraud, it's a cat and mouse game,
Yeah.
and I'm pretty certain that this fraud that you mentioned that happened in Hong Kong, there will be tools now, like for example, maybe a Zoom or Microsoft Teams will come up and say that they would ensure that they would put fraud detection tools to say that the person on the other side is a
Is a
computer
real
generated
person.
image or is a real person,
Yeah.
right? So if Zoom comes up with this facility, if you will, or a feature, if you will, now the poor accountant is very sure that at least I'm actually listening to my real boss, not an AGI, not a AI boss, right? So I think it's a matter of time where these frauds become a little bit more prevalent, and then the industry catches up. Fraud is something that is like a you will always have fraud. Today simple fraud is where people are asking people, poor guys to pay money through UPI. They ask you to download an app and they take control of your app. First they transfer five
Yeah.
rupees to you and then they take. So I mean these are such simple things, right? You would not expect anybody to download an app and then give control of your phone, right? It is so
Yeah.
far fetched. So I think that, and now they have to put in some controls, and things like if you're on a call and you're downloading an app, it shows an error or it warns you, and so on and so forth. So I think that will keep happening, and I think that fraud is probably one of the biggest beneficiaries of AI. Tons and tons of companies are doing it. I presume that a lot of new companies are coming about because looking at facial fraud, looking at voice fraud, looking at process fraud, looking at KYC fraud, transaction fraud, all of that put together is it's a pretty exciting world out there if you're in the world of fraud.
Yeah.
And across the board, not just financial, but it could cut across every segment. So that is one use case that's probably going to be the number one use case for the financial sector at least.
Anuj and Neeraj, we discussed both potential of AI as well as some of the challenges that AI presents. I think as closing remarks, where do you think AI in the fintech industry will go in the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, I think there's just so many use cases. We spoke about a few around onboarding, collections, risk management, but we've had our internal teams using generative AI now to start writing queries. They just give them the schema, and the team is becoming more efficient. They don't understand the query, so that's a challenge.
Yeah.
in case in case the query is written in a wrong way. So we've had to have that layer built in terms of process, but just bringing in so many efficiencies that I don't think we've tap the surface. And I think it's really about that, right? Which is, how can you deliver financial services? I mean, the business that Freo is in or Branch is in, it's really about how can you deliver financial services at a fraction of a cost what it used to cost to deliver these services earlier, right? So take any use case, any function that we have, it's going to get more and more omnipresent, and it's going to help bring in efficiencies everywhere. There's obviously the regulatory aspect. The regulator needs to be within a comfort zone, if not fully comfortable with the use of these kind of technologies. So I think we're evolving on all fronts. I mean, there's innovation happening to harness the power of it. There's been a lot of thinking happening to develop regulatory frameworks around it. And as Anuj was saying, there's even the fraudsters are innovating around it, right? So
Yeah.
we'll continue to. I think we'll continue to see a lot more adoption going forward, and it will become more and more mainstream, including in the traditional incumbent players. I don't think they can remain untouched.
Anuj, closing remarks from you?
I think if you are able to use it as an effective co-pilot, which is what typically today's use cases are, especially in the world of finance, where you really need to get it right to the second decimal, and therefore you will always need it in conjunction with something that you have developed, or in some use cases, physical a person looking at it. So I think it will become a very, very useful co-pilot, if you will, over the next maybe in about 2 or 3 years for sure, and then they will grow from there. I don't know what the future holds and what new technologies can come in, but at least in the next 3 or 4 years, I think it will be an effective co-pilot. The use cases, I think we've discussed enough, from underwriting to KYC to fraud, collections, transactions, even as a banking platform for being able to give your a view of your finances, what you do with money. All of that, I think, is just various inputs that AI will give you, and then you stitch it together into weaving a good story for the customer, and the use for it. I don't think that it's gonna be taking away of jobs as much as we think it does, because I think you still need people to make judgment calls, even if it is for the world of the world of creatives, right? So we have a marketing team for that matter, and while it helps them become far better and far productive, and far more efficient, they can generate videos with a snap of a button. But I think you still need judgment calls to be taken, and that will make that will ensure that we have the right set of people. As long as they're using it as a co-pilot and increasing their productivity, I think that will be super helpful to us. I am very hopeful in the world of the that onboarding piece, which is something that we didn't speak about much. We spoke largely on the KYC bit, but I think that a lot of products, and maybe in finance and maybe outside, will start leveraging the use of AI and the use of their language models, local language models, very specific to the Indian use cases. But today, the language models are not India specific, right? But
Right.
there are a few companies that have put that together. And once that infrastructure layer grows, I do think that the world of finance will use a lot of these Indian LLMs to be able to onboard the customer in a far easier, far better manner in their language, in lesser steps, making it look less and less daunting than it is. So I think that I'm really, really hopeful and excited to see. Neeraj brought about the point about incumbents. I think, they might struggle, in my opinion, because you've
Okay.
seen the adoption of technology, the way it happens. So, and the rate of change of technology on this aspect is pretty high, right? When you have a technology that comes in and you take about 5, 7 years for it to happen, then the large guys will, they'll tell their vendors, they'll figure it out, they'll have some use cases, etc., etc., etc. Then they have to have an adoption cycle. And general inertia as well, right? I mean, branch banking is suddenly you can't shut them down. There's a trust angle that's been developed. So
Yeah.
I do think that they will probably find it more difficult to adopt it, and when they adopt it, then the technology has changed, and I think that catch-up game will become a little bit difficult for them to do, and that's where I think that there may be use cases or opportunities for newer fintech companies to maybe come into this space, and hopefully the regulator takes note and allows for something like this to happen. Maybe gives out licenses to specific institutions like this. I hope. I mean, it's not there out there today, but I hope it happens. Obviously, with the right guardrails, how to use AI. But I think that's where we will be maybe 5 years down the line.
Thank you, Anuj and Neeraj, for joining us on this very insightful discussion on AI and fintech.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Alroy.
That's it from India Fintech Diaries. In case you haven't already registered, please to sign up for the DLAI Fintech Conclave 2024. Now in its fifth edition, the event is on the 6th of March at ITC Maratha, Mumbai, and brings together digital lenders, tech firms, government officials, banks, NBFCs, investors, and various startups to celebrate the industry as well as plan the year ahead. This year's theme of fintech evolution pioneering India's financial landscape promises to be a timely topic as fintech matures in India. So do attend, and until next time, stay safe.